Most visitors think of Le Marais as one of Paris's most fashionable neighborhoods, a place for boutique, café, historic buildings and busy streets. But Le Marais is not really one neighborhood. Within just a few streets, you can move from medieval Paris to the grand mansions of the 17th century, from the historic Jewish quarter to the center of LGBTQ+ life in Paris, and from some of the city's most talked about food addresses to gardens and courtyards hidden almost completely from view. So today, rather than simply giving you another list of places to visit, I want to show you 5 completely different worlds inside Le Marais. We will explore the Medieval Marais, the Royal and Aristocratic Marais, the Jewish Marais, the Foodie Marais, and finally the hidden gardens, courtyards and passages that many visitors walk straight past. I'm Alain, I've lived in Paris for more than 35 years, and this is Paris Top Tips. Before we begin, I've created an interactive Google map with every place featured in this video. You can use it to plan your own walk through the Marais, and you will find the link in the description below. Now, let us begin with the oldest part of the neighborhood, the Medieval Marais. Very little medieval Paris remains today. Buildings were transformed, wooden facades were covered, and entire streets disappeared when Paris was rebuilt during the 19th century. But Le Marais still preserves a few fascinating traces of the city that existed here more than 6 centuries ago. Rue des Barres is one of the most picturesque streets in the neighborhood. With its cobblestones, steps, old facades and the church of Saint-Gervais-Saint-Protais in the background, it certainly looks medieval, even though most of what we see today comes from different periods. The medieval connection becomes clearer at number 12 on the corner of Rue du Grenier-sur-l'Eau. This building was once the Paris residence of the Abbaye of Maubuisson, a religious community based outside the city. During the Middle Ages, several monasteries and abbeys maintained properties in this neighborhood. Being represented here allowed them to remain close to the royal and administrative center of Paris. Today, of course, Rue des Barres is no longer unknown to tourists. Its restaurants, terraces and attractive setting make it popular with photographers. And Les Frenchies mentioned it in one of their videos, which always is a sure way to make a place famous. But come early in the morning before the terraces fill up, and it remains one of the best streets in Paris for imagining the intimate scale of the medieval city. Just a few minutes away, at numbers 11 and 13 Rue François Miron, are 2 of the rare surviving timber-framed houses in central Paris. They are known as the House of the Reaper and the House of the Sheep, recalling the signs once used to identify buildings before modern street numbers. Timber houses were once common in Paris, but many disappeared because of fire regulations and later rebuilding. These facades were extensively restored in 1967, so they are not completely untouched medieval houses. But they still give us a vivid impression of how different the streets of old Paris once looked. Our final medieval stop is at 51 Rue de Montmorency. Built in 1407, this is generally considered the oldest surviving house in Paris. It was built for Nicolas Flamel, a real medieval Parisian, who later became associated with legends of alchemy and the philosopher's stone, and whose name was eventually used in Harry Potter. It is remarkable to think that this modest house, now hosting a Michelin-starred restaurant, has survived here for more than 6 centuries. The Medieval Marais was a neighborhood of narrow streets, religious communities, and modest houses. But from the late 16th century, everything began to change. Royal ambition and aristocratic wealth transformed Le Marais into one of the most fashionable districts in Paris, filled with grand squares, private mansions, and monumental churches. And the clearest symbol of that transformation is Place des Vosges. Originally known as the Place Royale, Place des Vosges is the oldest square in Paris, a real square measuring 140 meters on each side. The two-story residential buildings in red brickwork, white limestone, and blue slate roofs all present a highly uniform appearance. The two pavilions that rise higher than the others on the north and south faces are called the Pavilion of the King and of the Queen, though neither king nor queens ever lived here. The square soon became one of the most prestigious addresses in Paris. Aristocrats built residences around it, and prominent figures continued to live here long afterwards, including Victor Hugo, whose former house can be visited at number 6. Today, you can walk beneath the arcades, relax on a bench, or have a picnic on the lawn, or just simply admire what remains one of the most elegant squares in Paris. You can also have lunch at Carrette on the square. Or simply buy macarons there. They are among the best to be found in Paris. From Place des Vosges, a discreet passage on the southwestern corner can lead you directly into our next location. But here, I enter Hôtel de Sully through the main gate. In French, an hôtel particulier is not a hotel where you can book a room. It is a grand private residence, generally arranged between a courtyard and a garden. This one was built at the beginning of the 17th century and later purchased by the Duke of Sully, the former finance minister of King Henry IV. The building itself is not normally open for visits, but you can freely cross its magnificent courtyard and garden. Yes, I know, I'm showing you every corner of it. But that's because it's my favorite place in Le Marais, and I want you to understand why I love it so much. And at the back of the garden is the passage leading to Place des Vosges. For me, it is one of the most beautiful spots in the Marais. And even though I have walked this route between Rue Saint-Antoine and Place des Vosges via the Hôtel de Sully dozens of times, I still enjoy it as much. The success of Place Royale, before it was called Place des Vosges, helped make Le Marais extremely fashionable. Wealthy families competed to construct increasingly impressive residences, and many of those hôtels particuliers still survive today. But their purpose has changed completely. Former aristocratic homes now contain museums, libraries, archives and offices, meaning that some of the grandest architecture in Le Marais is once again accessible to the public. One of the best examples is Musée Carnavalet. The museum occupies two historic mansions, the Hôtel Carnavalet and the neighboring Hôtel Le Pelletier de Saint-Fargeau. Inside, more than 3,800 objects and historic interiors tell the story of Paris, from prehistoric settlements to the present day. And this permanent collection is free. But even without studying every exhibit, the buildings themselves justify a visit. The courtyards, formal garden, sculpted facades and reconstructed rooms are all part of the experience. One of the courtyards is home to Joly, a restaurant that offers a pleasant and welcome break on sunny days. Nearby, the Hôtel d'Albret is another residence hidden behind a monumental doorway on Rue des Francs-Bourgeois. The mansion was built and altered by several wealthy owners over the centuries, and parts of it are associated with the architect François Mansart. Today, instead of housing an aristocratic family, it contains the Cultural Affairs Department of the city of Paris. Its elegant courtyard is another reminder that behind many apparently closed doors in Le Marais lies an entirely different architectural world. The courtyard of the Bibliothèque historique de la ville de Paris belongs to another remarkable mansion, the Hôtel de Lamoignon. Built from 1559, it is one of the oldest aristocratic residences in Paris. Since 1969, it has housed a specialist library dedicated largely to the history of Paris. But you do not have to be conducting historical research to appreciate the entrance and courtyard, which offer a peaceful contrast to the busy Rue des Francs-Bourgeois just outside. The most spectacular and monumental doorway and courtyard, as you will see, belongs to the Hôtel de Sully. At the beginning of the 18th century, the Rohan-Soubise family transformed an older residence into a palace designed to demonstrate their importance at the royal court. The mansion was acquired by the States in 1808 and became the home of the National Archives. Its sweeping semicircular colonnade creates one of the grandest entrances in Le Marais. The former staterooms now contain the Musée des Archives Nationales, which is free to visit. Even if the historic documents themselves are not your main interest, take some time to admire the magnificent rooms and libraries that house them. The families who transformed Le Marais did not build only private mansions. Royal patronage and powerful religious orders also produced some of the neighborhood's most impressive churches. The most monumental is Saint-Paul-Saint-Louis on Rue Saint-Antoine. The church was constructed for the Jesuits between 1627 and 1641 with support from King Louis XIII. Its architecture represented a major departure from the Gothic churches traditionally found in Paris, introducing a more theatrical Baroque style inspired by churches in Rome. The first Mass was celebrated by Cardinal Richelieu in 1641. Inside, look for the high dome, the richly decorated chapels, and the two shell-shaped holy water fonts donated by Victor Hugo when his daughter Léopoldine was married here. The mansions, squares and churches of Le Marais reflect centuries of royal power, aristocratic wealth and religious influence. But another community has also played a central role in the identity of Le Marais. Around Rue des Rosiers lies the Pletzel, the historic Jewish quarter of Paris. A neighborhood shaped by community and culture, but also by persecution, courage and remembrance. Today, boutiques and tourists have changed the area considerably. Yet synagogues, traditional shops, commemorative plaques and memorials still preserves its Jewish identity. Rue des Rosiers is the best known street in the Jewish Marais. Many visitors come here for the falafel restaurants, but try to look beyond the queues. You will still find kosher bakeries and delicatessens, Jewish bookshops, religious buildings, and plaques recalling the families who once lived here. The street has become increasingly fashionable and commercial, but it remains a lively meeting point between Jewish heritage and contemporary Le Marais. At Cannes Delicatessen and Bakery, you'll find excellent Jewish pastries and an outstanding pastrami sandwich. And if you don't mind queuing, L'As du Falafel is famous for its falafel. I can't give you a personal verdict though, because falafel simply isn't my thing. Yann Couvreur also offers excellent pastries, although these are typically French rather than Jewish. For me, Sacha Finkelstein is clearly the best delicatessen in the neighborhood. In front of the nearby Hospitalière Saint-Gervais School is the Parvis des 260 enfants. Its name commemorates 260 Jewish children who attended this school and died after being deported during the Holocaust. The contrast is particularly moving because this is still an active school. Children continue to play here today, in the same place where an earlier generation was deprived of its future. Other schools in Le Marais carry similar reminders. Here, on the facade of Collège François Couperin, another plaque commemorates Jewish children who were deported during the Second World War. And just beside it, the street name introduces a different aspect of this history. The Allée des Justes parmi les Nations, the alley of the righteous among the nations. In this small street, the Mur des Justes bears the name of more than 3,900 men and women who risked their own lives to help save Jews in France during the Second World War. They were recognized as righteous among the nations, a title awarded by Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. This is the same distinction awarded to Oskar Schindler, whose story became known worldwide. The wall stands in a public passage beside the Memorial de la Shoah and is permanently accessible. Take a moment to read some of the names. Each represents an individual decision to resist persecution and protect another human being. Thanks in part to people like these, around 3/4 of the Jews living in France survived persecution by both the Nazi occupiers and the collaborationist Vichy regime. And to learn more about this dark chapter in French history, I strongly encourage you to visit the Memorial de la Shoah. Its permanent exhibition explains the persecution and deportation of Jews from France, while the Wall of Names records the 75,568 people who were deported, including 11,400 children. The Marais is fortunately not limited to tragedy. It is also a story of community, culture, and continuity. And that living culture can still be experienced through the neighborhood's shops, bakeries, and restaurants. But Le Marais has now become one of Paris's most popular food destinations. And not every famous address is necessarily where I would recommend eating. So now, let us explore the Foodie Marais. Almost every guide, including me in past years' videos, is telling you to begin at the Marché des Enfants Rouges. Dating back to 1615, this is the oldest covered market still operating in Paris. And I understand why it attracts visitors. The setting is historic, the atmosphere is lively, and you can find food from France, Morocco, Italy, Japan, and several other countries. But personally, I'm becoming less and less enthusiastic about it. It increasingly feels less like a traditional neighborhood market and more like an overcrowded food court filled with visitors who have discovered the same stalls on Instagram or TikTok. At busy times, the narrow passages become difficult to navigate, queues form everywhere, and finding somewhere to sit can become a challenge. There are still a few genuine food shops here, but prepared food now dominates the experience. So by all means, come and have a look. But I would not automatically assume that this is where you will have your best meal in Le Marais. And only a few steps away, there is a place I would much rather choose for a quick snack. Chez Hello is a charming small grocery store, boasting an array of excellent products. However, what truly elevates it to heavenly heights are their sandwiches, a taste sensation that can transport you to culinary bliss. They propose only 4 sandwiches, including a vegetarian option. I chose what they call the classic: ham on the bone, 24-month aged comté, caramelized onions, salted butter, and baby spinach. So delicious. For an excellent viennoiserie, head to Saint-Boulangerie on the nearby Rue des Gravilliers. This bakery places considerable emphasis on natural fermentation, carefully sourced flour, and traditional production methods. But you do not need to be interested in the technical side of baking to appreciate the result. The breads have real character, and the viennoiseries are excellent. This is definitely where I would come for a very good croissant, pain au chocolat, or chausson aux pommes while exploring the northern Marais. Saint performed particularly well when I tested some of the best pastries in Paris, and its apple turnover was one of my favorites. For something more elaborate, I would then go to Brigat, close to Place des Vosges. This bakery and patisserie was created by 2 Italian brothers, and its creations combine French technique with a clear Italian influence. You will find familiar classics, but also more sophisticated pastries featuring pistachio, hazelnut, citrus fruit, and rich Italian-style creams. The presentation is beautiful, but these are not pastries designed only to look impressive on social media. The flavors are generally just as convincing as the appearance. So if for a viennoiserie, I would choose Saint. For a more elaborate patisserie, Brigat is one of my favorite addresses in the neighborhood. Now if you're looking for a proper sit-down meal, I have 2 very different recommendations. For a classic Parisian brasserie experience, my first choice is Beaufinger. It stands just on the eastern edge of Le Marais, close to Place de la Bastille, and has been serving customers since 1864. The interior is one of its greatest attractions: wood paneling, mirrors, traditional banquettes, and a magnificent stained glass dome above the dining room. Beaufinger is particularly known for Alsatian dishes and seafood, but the menu also offers the familiar French brasserie classics. This is not a hidden neighborhood restaurant. It is a large and historic institution. But unlike some famous Parisian brasseries that now survive mainly on their reputation, I have found the food and service here genuinely convincing. Come for the spectacular dining room, but also for a proper traditional meal. For something completely different, I recommend Bonnard on Rue des Gravilliers. As a meat eater, it may sound slightly surprising for me to recommend a vegetarian restaurant. But Bonnard is simply a great restaurant, whatever your eating habits. The cooking is creative, refined, and generous, with vegetables treated as the main attraction rather than as a substitute for meat. The dining room is warm and intimate, and the food presentation is far more sophisticated than in the average vegetarian cafe. I have eaten here several times, and it remains one of my favorite restaurants in this part of Paris. Even committed meat eaters may be surprised by how satisfying the experience can be. 2 other restaurants I would strongly recommend are Le Bourguignon du Marais and Café des Musées, without a doubt 2 of the best bistros in the neighborhood. So the Marché des Enfants Rouges may be the most famous food destination in Le Marais, but it is far from your only option. But after all that food, it is time to find somewhere quieter. Behind the walls and mansions of Le Marais are gardens, courtyards, and small alleyways that many visitors never notice. That's the Hidden and Green Marais, and it is where we are going next. You remember the Hôtel de Sully? We went there in the Roll on Aristocratic Marais chapter. But if you walk through its grand courtyard and go on the right before entering the mansion, you will discover the gardens of the Archives Nationales. A sequence of lawns, pathways, and former private gardens extending beside the historic mansions. The gardens are free to enter and provide an unexpectedly peaceful escape from the busy Rue des Francs-Bourgeois. Just nearby, behind the Hôtel de Sully, which now houses the Picasso Museum, is another public garden that many of the museum visitors never see. Its lawns and pathways preserve a beautiful view towards the 17th century mansion, while offering local families a place to relax and play. Very close by, just on the other side of the Picasso Museum, you will find Jardin Berthe Weil, which has a more contemporary and ecological character. It honors Berthe Weil, the pioneering art dealer who supported Picasso before he became famous. Native plants, fruit trees, nesting boxes, and an insect hotel encourage biodiversity, while part of the garden is deliberately left inaccessible to protect wildlife. Just nearby, Square Georges Quint feels like a garden and an open-air museum combined. Among the trees and flower beds are historic sculptures and architectural fragments from the collections of Musée Carnavalet, including this bronze statue by Aristide Maillol. This may be one of the most genuinely hidden gardens in Le Marais. Reached through a discreet passage on Rue Villehardouin, it occupies the former garden of a 17th century private mansion. With its stone benches, climbing roses, and surrounding facades, it feels remarkably distant from the city streets just outside. Through two easily missed entrances on Rue des Rosiers and Rue des Francs-Bourgeois, we can reach one of the neighborhood's most surprising gardens. Surrounded by historic mansions, it contains a small ecological reserve, an enormous fig tree, and even the remains of a tower from the 13th century wall of Philippe Auguste. Our final location is not really a garden, but it perfectly represents the hidden character of Le Marais. Village Saint-Paul is a network of cobble courtyards and passages filled with antique dealers, designers, galleries, restaurants and small shops. There is no single grand entrance. You can enter from several surrounding streets and simply wander from one courtyard into another. And that is precisely the pleasure of this place. From the street, you would never imagine how much is hidden inside. These gardens and courtyards reveal one final side of Le Marais, but they also capture what makes the entire neighborhood so fascinating. Within just a few streets, we have moved from medieval Paris to grand aristocratic mansions, from the historic Jewish quarter to some of the neighborhood's best places to eat, and finally into gardens and passages hidden almost completely from view. Le Marais cannot really be understood by simply following its busiest streets. You have to look through open gateways, enter discreet passages, and occasionally allow yourself to get slightly lost. Because here, some of the most memorable places are the ones you almost walk past without noticing. You will find every location from this video on the interactive map linked in the description below. And tell me in the comments, which side of Le Marais would you most like to explore? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon for another Paris Top Tips.